Hey there.
Hey, Kron.
Thank you for joining me and for taking the time to have this conversation as part of our Building Congregational Power project at the Community Renewal Society. The goal, just to state it broadly, is to invite more congregations to come into our ranks and also to provide opportunities and resources to strengthen and sharpen and enhance the organizing and community engagement work that our congregations are doing. So that's a part of that's the motivation for the conversation. And in this moment, we thought who better to talk with than you, Pastor John, about the work you've been doing at your congregation and some of the ways in which the world, it seems, is talking about that. So let's just jump in. Why don't you tell the people who are watching who you are and a little bit about the work you've been doing?
Yeah, so my name's John Edgerton. I'm the lead pastor of First United Church of Oak Park, which is in Oak Park, Illinois, which is just to the west of the western border of the city of Chicago. About one block to the east of my house is the western border of Chicago. I grew up on the south side in Hyde Park, which is where the Chicago Theological Seminary is located, the United Church of Christ Seminary. And so the work that we've been doing in Lent has been a number of things that fell under the banner of what we were calling fasting from whiteness. And this was a full congregation-wide program for Lent that actually began with our children's program, doing age-appropriate anti-racism programming for children, and also our worship life we built around the theme of anti-racism, and our adult ed we built around anti-racism, and this was in keeping with a longer term work that we've been doing. But that's what really got us a lot of attention kind of unexpectedly in the season of Lent.
How was your Lent, by the way? Was your Lent reflective and grounding?
Yeah, well, it was sort of the tale of two different Lents. So we had a really normal, really wonderful Lent for the first 5 weeks of it, where we had really good attendance. We had wonderful engagement from the parents on our children's programming, which is called Tell Me the Truth About Racism, which is a Montessori style, godly play style curriculum, telling spiritual formation stories about the history of our country in particular. And we had our music program built around removing, for the time of Lent, removing any music that was written or composed by or arranged by white people, and instead having the music that we sing and play be entirely from composers of color, Black people, Indigenous people, people of color from around the world. And this was a really great season for the music of our church. The choir really loved it. The congregation really loved it. We were learning all sorts of new favorites, songs that people are now songs people really love. And we were also just, our worship life was so wonderful. And so that was sort of the first half of how Lent was working.
And then what happened?
Well, and then a group called Turning Point USA, which is a far-right organization started by a Chicago native named Charlie Kirk. If people want to learn more about Turning Point USA, you can read about them on the Anti-Defamation League website. You can read about them on the Southern Poverty Law Center website. This is an extremist group that has been investigated in the past for racial bias and illegal campaign activity. And so Turning Point USA has a media wing, and somebody came onto our property and did a selfie style video in front of our church banner. We're church, we make banners
all the time,
and it's just like regular.
And what did the banner say? What did it say?
Yeah, the banner said, "Fasting from whiteness. This Lent, we build our worship life around the voices of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. And so, we always have church banners about different kinds of things.
Yeah.
And somebody from Turning Point took a video of that. This got featured on Charlie Kirk's radio show the next day. Then it got picked up that story was posted on Turning Point USA's website. That story written on Turning Point USA, that was then copied verbatim and broadcast across the country by Sinclair Broadcast Group, which owns a very large number of local news affiliates. And this was published simultaneously that day online, as well as in the evening news across the country. That was then picked up by the New York Post, the Daily Mail in the UK, and then finishing it out was Fox and Friends a couple of days later. And so over the course of that time, this far-right extremist group, their involvement in this became obscured to where by the time that the New York Post was covering it, the Daily Mail was covering it, Fox and Friends were covering it, the fact that it was a manufactured outrage piece that was full
That
of
got lost in all of the
right, that was intentionally obscured
Yeah.
by this being run upwards into Sinclair Broadcast Group and then outwards into these national media outlets. And so that's what happened. That's what happened after about 5 weeks of Lent, was that we were the target of an intentional smear campaign. That's what happened.
And I mean, I think it's so important to like just name that in all of its clarity, right? And so because of that, because there is this smear campaign, I want to reground us then in the simple question of what, in this attempt to both fast from whiteness and also lift up the voices of Black and Indigenous communities and experiences, what was your goal? What were you hoping as a congregation and as a congregational leader? What were you hoping to actually accomplish with this?
Yeah, we were really wanting to continue on with work that the congregation has done for a number of decades. The town of Oak Park is a racially diverse place in a city that is exceptionally segregated, and it is still not. So the city of Chicago is a tremendously segregated place, and during the 1970s and 1980s, when redlining and white flight and all of that stuff, blockbusting was happening, when there was intentional policies of disinvestment from Black communities, the Oak Park had, through a number of different tactics, maintained a racial diversity rather than having resegregation come into the town. And so that became a large part of the town's identity, is that Oak Park is a place where you move if you want to live in a place that is racially diverse, in a city that otherwise the norm is segregation. De facto segregation is the norm in the city of Chicago. And those policies and those practices were things that members of my congregation, elders in my congregation, the Black members and white members who were elders in the church, they were instrumental in making that happen. They were instrumental in the organizing that built that up, both in terms of the ordinance, the Fair Housing Ordinance, as well as the launching of an organization that is now called the Oak Park Regional Housing Center, but at the time was an organization that was intentionally selling houses and renting houses in a way to maintain diversity in the village. And so for us, we are trying to highlight the fact that work, the work of racial justice, isn't over at all.
Right.
And that we need to find and raise up the ways that in today's environment, what is the work of racial justice? What does it look like? And for our community, where we are in Oak Park, the place where we're centered. And for that, it's about highlighting and raising the fact that whiteness and white perspectives are still too much the considered the norm, and what is the default, and that other important voices of our community simply by taking up so much space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as a predominantly white church, we're trying to raise for our faith community, for the town, the idea that that predominantly white spaces have to be the ones to clear out of the center. And that if you don't do that, the center just stays the same.
Yeah, I am so moved by this goal, and I have so many questions. But one thing that seems important for us to name is, in the work that you're talking about, some people would say, why is this a part of the church's mission? Why is this a part of the church's mandate in this moment? What do you say to those people? All right, and they may even go as far as to say this is not the church's responsibility, right? That people should come and we should sing good songs and we should worship God and we should go home, and that's okay. So one, what do you say to them? Why do you say this is the church's mandate, right? To take on these big social questions and to provide a way to listen and learn and be together. What do you say to that?
To me, this was something that Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis had said when I was a couple of weeks ago when I was speaking with her. She said that the church, the American church, must extricate whiteness and white-centeredness from our culture, or else we will not be faithful to the gospel.
Right. Wow.
And for me, the gospel is not fundamentally about my personal relationship with Jesus, whatever that means. My relationship to God is through the church, and it is, we're in Eastertide and we're reading stories right now about Jesus appearing in the risen Christ appearing to Peter and instructing Peter that if Peter loves Jesus, then he would care for Christ's sheep, and that he would care, that what he would do is he would serve those who are in need, and he would. So to me, the church's mission is about trying to live into the world as the beloved realm of God. And for this place, for this time, for our country, the church has to look at and reckon with racism, or else we're not being honest about about where the distance is between the way things are and the beloved realm of God, as God has promised us. There's other things too, there's you've got environmental devastation, which also intersects with racism. There's other things too, but if you ignore racism and white-centeredness and white supremacy in this country, then it's not possible to be faithful to the gospel, which is proclaiming liberation to the captives, and which is proclaiming. So it's, to me, this is gospel work. Justice building work is serving the gospel.
I love this, that if we're not in this moment reckoning with racism and white supremacy in this country, we're not being faithful to the gospel. Powerful. Are your folks thinking about the life of the congregation? Are your folks, are your people, are the folks in the pews, are they better for having gone on this journey, not just the fast, but this larger strategy of taking on and dealing with and answering questions about race and racism and how we be better and stronger? Is the life of your congregation richer for this work and for this journey?
I think it will be. It's this kind of finished up this past week, the Lent. This is whatever, the 3 days after Easter. So I think the congregation is still really shaken up a little bit by our suddenly having this national spotlight on us that was at first really really negative and harsh, and then later more supportive, a mix of things. But I think it's been I think I think it shook the congregation up. I think that I was surprised by the vehemence
Mhm.
of a lot of the messages that were sent to me. Um the yeah, the simple the simple hate, for
Mhm.
lack of any, it's not
Yeah.
accurate to describe much of it as anything other than
Other than
simple
hate, yeah.
hate.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it was um, directed at us, and we had people who were, just who were doing things like sending us messages saying that we were race traitors, and it's like, um, it was very eye opening about of the state of whiteness
Mhm.
in this country today, that there are those for whom their identity as white people and their ident and this country as a place where white people are in charge seems to be a sacrum sanctorum to them, right? A place that cannot be messed with even a little bit, or else it will, a sanctum sanctorum. And so it's that was, I think that's shaken us up a little bit. And
It makes me ask then, right, in the ways in which this effort to take on race and racism and talk meaningfully about it and do something different, did it also open your eyes in any way to the level of the depth of support and the depth of commitment to this work that exists in the congregation and around the congregation? Did any of that did that in any way go, wow, I didn't realize that there were so many people out here really trying to do this work? Did that happen at all for you?
yeah, I thought that there was a lot of what our congregation did was people kind of like stiffened up their backs and said, like, we're not gonna, like, we're not gonna cave in to
Mhm.
this, and people were and yes, from my congregation, that was that was a reaction of just strength from people. But I have said so many times in the past couple of weeks, thank God for the church, pretty
Mhm.
broad, quite broadly, because the National UCC, the Presbyterian Church, the Illinois Conference, church organizations like CRS, church affiliated organizations like CRS, the church organization I'm a part of in Portland, congregations around the country, the people who are devoted so powerful and strong. And not because like we are so important or all that as a congregation, we're not. But when people saw, here's a congregation that is trying to do something, trying to use the voice of the church in an anti-racist way, getting absolutely, creamed
Mhm.
by, in the national media. And the support of the church very broadly has been, has been inspiring. That when the churches say we're doing this work,
Yeah.
then they really show up.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting because these are the moments that really, I was talking to a friend a few weeks ago, and I was like, one of the beauties of being people of faith is that in moments of difficulty, there is something to call on. There is something to dig into, right? There is something to hold on to and be buttressed by. And so there's a beauty to the faith as this broad idea, and so powerful that your folks were able to lean into that and be stiffened and strengthened by their own faith. What do
And it's
you?
also, I mean, you know, this is a sort of a church organization, so I'll talk this way in this place.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
terms
yeah.
I also felt very much the clear upholding and strengthening of God and the Holy
Mhm.
Spirit. And this was in some simple ways, things like I would be, I would work 18-hour days and go to sleep and wake up refreshed,
Mhm.
and would, do it all again for, probably 10, 12 days of doing that. I'd go to bed with, realizing, if this piece of this doesn't come together tomorrow, we're really going to have a problem. I don't know if we're going to be able to continue. And I would go to sleep in prayer about this and wake up, and there is the solution that has dropped into my lap. And time and time again, all went we were able to continue in this work and move forward in this work over a period of a couple of weeks. And it's not because I had some grand plan from the beginning. This was a total surprise to me. And then through the providence and goodness of God and the upholding of the Holy Spirit and the support of the church, we were able to react in the moment. And so it's, I very much felt the blessing of God in this work as well.
So interesting how spirit and divinity can, show up for us. I want to ask you to think about, again, what in the first conversation that we had, what impressed me, what was impressed upon me was, again, that the fast from whiteness wasn't just a single tactic. It wasn't just a single thing. It was part of this larger program and endeavor that the church had taken on. And that feels important to always come back to. And so I want to invite you then to share one or two lessons about organizing, about community organizing, about taking on the big questions as congregations. One or two lessons that you have learned for those who are listening and contemplating, what can their congregations do and how can their congregations show up in these moments, right, for the world, for our communities? Lessons.
Yeah, Tim, one thing that comes to mind is our village's process for ballot challenges for people running for local office. So this is a process where, if somebody wants to run for being on the village board, to be an elected official, then they need a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork involved in running for office, and you turn in your paperwork. And then there's a process that exists for somebody to say, hey, that paperwork's not right. So that's just the public process. And the way that works in theory, on face, that looks like, yeah, okay, good. This is like everybody has to fill their paperwork out properly and the public can challenge it. And this is a way of having accountability, and that on face looks like it's race neutral. But in practice, in the last time that we had we had a village race, what we had was we had two Black men who were running for village office, and they were the only two whose paperwork got challenged. And if you go back to the race prior to that, also the Black candidates were the ones who got their names challenged. And if I was talking, and back in the 80s, there were women who were running for office, and they were getting challenged based on whether their birth certificate names and their married names weren't the same. And so this practice that looks as if it's neutral, in fact, is used as a way to create an uphill battle for women, for people of color. And what you wind up with is an elected board that is whiter and more male, more than the town. And the people who are responsible for hearing that ballot challenge, and it winds up being the longest serving person on the board, and it winds up with essentially this all white group checking on these ballot challenges. And so the reason why I bring that up is that we have this small fidgety piece of town business that is a part of how our upholding a system in which our elected officials are whiter and more male than the town itself, and whiter and more male than the overall slate of candidates. And so in this, I look at this, and from the pushback that we've received and all that, and I come away with redoubled intention to do the organizing work that it takes to change that ballot process. So that we, and to just name it, right? To name it publicly as, this is a tool of white supremacy.
Wow.
And even if you don't want it to be that way, that's how it works.
Isn't that, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you got to dismantle that stuff. And so it's those are the kinds of things that individual churches or groups of churches in a town, if you pay attention to the fidgety down in the weeds ways that things work, like
Mhm.
you're gonna find it's not, you're not gonna have to work that hard to find systems of oppression that benefit, that are fundamentally white supremacist in nature. Like there's a lot of that.
Mhm.
Like you can just pay attention a little bit and you'll find things that you can work on a local level.
That's a powerful lesson. I got one more question
Yeah.
because we want to keep this tight. Well, two. One, has the work and your participation in a organization like CRS, has that been useful to you as other congregations think about, do I want to get connected to this thing? Am I going to be well served by putting time and energy into this work of being with other congregations like mine? Has our work, the stuff that we provide, has that been useful to you all in this moment?
Yeah. Well, I just want to, one very, very tangible way that CRS was extremely helpful was we were in the process of trying to shift the narrative away from what the sort of the right-wing smear campaign was saying to something that was instead highlighting the importance of anti-racism work.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that was a very daunting task because we had national and international outlets that were coming at us. And so I got a call from Jason Carson Wilson from CRS offering help. And what we needed help with was to get a different narrative out into the media. And so, he and CRS really threw a lot of energy into pulling together a national press conference that we did in DC, and we had the engagement and involvement of CRS helped to have the organizational heft that we needed to be able to have an amazing speaker lineup, which really helped raise up the just the visibility of this and get it out there. And so in a straightforward sense, one of the things we wanted to do the most was shift the narrative and tell the gospel and preach the gospel and talk about anti-racism work and why it's critical for the faith community.
Yeah.
And without CRS's help, we wouldn't have been able to pull together that press conference. Mm-hmm. We went from not having a plan for a press conference to a completed amazing press conference in 48 hours.
Yeah.
And that was CRS was indispensable in pulling that together. So
these sorts of moments and social issues like really highlight what it means to be in community with other people of like minds. There are probably people who are congregational leaders who are watching this, and they may feel buttressed or they may feel a little wobbly, like, whoa. And not every social issue that we take on leads to this kind of backlash for sure. So we want to say that up front. Like a lot of times we do work in our communities that sometimes feel like they go unnoticed, like nobody's seen that we're taking on these issues. And then other times things become national stories. But in either case, what do you say to congregational leaders about who are either doing or thinking about really leaning into the work of racial justice and the work of dealing meaningfully with racism and white supremacy in this moment? What say you to those folks?
The people and communities and organizations who you will be able to work with because of taking that work seriously is unbelievable. The groups of people, the organizations, there is an amazing movement happening right now around this country for racial justice, and it is across generations, it is across organizational barriers, it is in every sector of the country, and it is, as much as it is true that there are loud voices who are opposed to racial justice, they are so loud because they know that they are losing.
Mhm.
And so the important thing to do is to have faith and take that, take that plunge in a way that makes sense for your community, in a way that is that will have tangible impact for the people who you are in community with.
Mhm.
And you'll find that it expands the circle of beloved community around your church in a way that is so much more powerful than any kind of negative reaction could ever be.
Mm. Thank you. What a powerful word, what a powerful moment, and what good work you, sir, and your congregation have been leading. I appreciate you. And from the Community Renewal Society and our team, we send God's peace and God's blessings and deep hope and faith that the work will continue and that lives will continue to be changed and our society be transformed.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I can, look forward to being able to keep working on this stuff with CRS, with other organizations that are doing this work. Because again, there are so many people of goodwill, good conscience, good faith, people of faith, and the secular world who are doing this work. There are people. We aren't in this alone. We're in
Yeah.
it together.
What a time to be alive and what a time
Yes.
to be doing good work. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you, Pastor Edgerton. All the best to you now.
Thanks so much, Graham.
Bye.
Bye.